This is Energy Perspectives, a weekly podcast produced in Guyana that delves into the developments unfolding in the world's fastest growing economy.
Hi there. Welcome to this week's episode of the Energy Perspectives podcast. I am your hostess, CEO of the Guyana Energy Conference and Supply Chain Expo, Kiana Wilberg. In our midst today is the Chief Operating Officer for the Caribbean Office of the Afreximbank Bank, Okechukwu Ihejirika. Sir, welcome to our program and thank you for being here.
Thank you so much, Kiana, and it's my pleasure being here as well.
Great. So to start our conversation, I'd like to first examine what are some of the key objectives of the Afreximbank in pushing to strengthen the connections between Africa and the Caribbean.
Yeah, very simple. I think the connection between Africa and the Caribbean is historical. I mean, dates back centuries ago, during the slave trade, I would say, when people came to the region involuntarily. But right now, it makes sense to work on reversing that trend, like we put it, creating a new middle passage where people are now coming voluntarily to do business. And that means also coming out of the shackles of the past, that if people could do it in the 18th century, it's possible to actually also do it in the present century where things are working on a computer stage, a computer speed. So our coming here stems from the engagement between the African Union and the CARICOM Commission, where following the declaration of the Caribbean region, the CARICOM region, and the Africa diaspora as the sixth region of the African Union. So that makes sense. That, we recognize that historic pact that we have, and we now try and see how we can create trade relationship between these two regions, which is significantly non-existent as we speak. I mean, if you look at the numbers, it's less than 1%, and it's basically pure commodities. And also you look at it, there are a lot of challenges that's making this not to happen. Logistical challenges, there's no direct ship route to Africa, there's no direct air route to Africa. So that makes it difficult for people and goods to move across. And that also makes it difficult for investment flows to go between the two regions, which is a challenge on its own. So our coming, we believe, should try and find solution to some of these nagging problems, to try and make people see value in investing across both sides. That means from Africa and also from the Caribbean, and see the sense in doing that. Because there's actually a lot that we can gain if we foster that relationship between the two regions. Example would be, if you look at what happened during the COVID-19 pandemic, where the politics played a role in vaccine allocation.
Yes.
But historically, the two regions came together, Africa and the Caribbean. We worked together on a unified vaccine acquisition model where all the countries put their resources together or put their demands together, and it built up into a critical mass that made it possible to go and sit down with the manufacturers to ask them to deliver at the same time that they're delivering with the rest of the world. And that made it also possible for smaller island countries in the Caribbean to get it at a cheaper rate, because they are now also part of a bigger order that has been made with that particular manufacturer. So they get it at a cheaper rate, at the same price with some of the bigger countries in Africa. And Afreximbank played a significant role, putting down a $2 billion guarantee that facilitated that vaccine exchange. So what this says is that there's a lot to gain from fostering trade between Africa and the Caribbean, and it creates some kind of resilience, especially in difficult times, because both regions share similar problems, and solution to those similar problems definitely, I believe, will be the same as well.
Thank you, sir. Now, the Afreximbank, since its pursuit of the initiative where you're trying to strengthen the ties between these two regions, you've also sort of pushed the envelope in making financing available. And I believe that this envelope was at 1.5 billion US, and now there's interest in moving this to 3 billion US. Now, can you tell us a bit about what some of this funding is being directed towards?
Perfect. So first of all, I think the issue of financing is critical if you want to boost trade. All the conversation we will have to say there's need for trade between Africa and the Caribbean will be worthless if there are no financing to facilitate it. So that's why at the point of establishing a branch in the Caribbean, which is the Caribbean office based in Barbados, which was launched in August last year, the board magnanimously approved an initial limit size of $1.5 billion. So that means we use those funds to finance qualifying projects that will come out from the region. And the idea also was that, because at the time we have 11 out of the 15 CARICOM countries who are partner members. So the idea was that this limit will double to $3 billion if all the CARICOM countries were to become members of the bank. And partner members of the bank means the countries have acceded to a partnership agreement, which actually is the bedrock or the foundation on which our support and our financing in the member countries will have to start. Like we said, Afreximbank, by virtue of its mandate, is a trade finance institution. So that means projects that will be of interest to us, we have a nexus to trade, as so to say. So that means it could be things that could enhance export potentials of a country. We believe strongly that Africa and the Caribbean have a huge gap in industrialization. So they need to industrialize, they need to produce more goods so that they can also have their fair share in the global value chain. So that means we want to finance and support projects that can enhance production capabilities of member countries on one hand, and enhance their export earning potentials. So that will also improve significantly their balance of trade, so which is something that would be the first level of support. We also do know that the trade shouldn't just be on one side. You may actually not focus only on exports. There might be need also to support the corresponding import of essential raw materials, essential goods, which you definitely may not have comparative advantage in producing. So that might be also something that could be a challenge to member countries. So we can dedicate part of this limit to support those imports into the member countries here. And important to highlight that the need, it must not be something that's actually Africa to the Caribbean trade that we support. We can actually also support, once you are a member country, you can have trade with your existing trade partners. We will be happy to facilitate that through our financing. The next line of items that that can also benefit significantly from this investment will be things that we call trade enabling infrastructures. So trade enabling infrastructures will typically be those infrastructures that will facilitate the free flow of trade in a country. So take, for example, if the port facility in a country is obsolete, goods can come in smoothly. So we think port is a trade enabling infrastructure and we can support it. Whilst, for instance, we may not be able to support domestic road construction because that wouldn't fit into our mandate, but if that road is going to be something that cuts across one country to the other, which by extension will facilitate trade between those two countries, then we'll look at it because that will be trade enabling in that nature. And hospitality side hotels, significantly also are things that can also benefit from that because that's also trade enabling. If you're a tourist, if you're a visitor, you wouldn't feel comfortable going into a country where you cannot find a good hotel to stay in. So we can also support that under a dedicated means. And the other one also is the creatives, so which is a new phase, is a new emerging area. We believe exports must not necessarily be in terms of just goods, can also be in terms of intellectual property, in terms of services that are unique to specific regions. And we know Africa and the Caribbean do share this historical content. There are a lot of traditional values, cultural values that we can develop and build upon, which can also be extended and exported. So we dedicate so much to developing that. We've created a program we call the Creative Africa Nexus, which helps us, identify financeable programs under the creative side. And we look at it from 5 verticals. including things like film production, like fashion design, culinary skills, culinary side of stuff, and some others, which are which are different, but actually 5 of them that we're looking at. And what this means is that we can help identify talent, we can help nurture those talents, and hold them by creating an avenue where they can also interact with those who have made it. And they learn 1 or 2 things, and they're able to plow those things back and then become the new stars. And I always say in Barbados, where I live, you never know that there are a lot of Rihannas walking on the street. But it's just that create this kind of program that can help identify them while they are still young and nurture them. Under the CANEX program, we'll be having the CANEX weekend next November. And it's going to be in Algiers, Algeria. And that program is going to be big because what it tends to bring is to bring the talents who are from the region to come in and engage. The last time we had it in Abidjan, Cote d'Ivoire, we had people like Idris Alba who came in and they were able to talk to budding talent. And you can imagine what that would do to the ego. Just
certainly inspiring.
So that becomes value through CANEX on the creative side. And finally, the other thing I'll talk about in terms of what we intend to do with the huge pause that the board has given us is also facilitation. So facilitation will mean that sometimes you don't even know what is available next door. So you're living in Guyana, you don't know what you can buy in Barbados because there's no avenue where you guys can exchange ideas. So we try and also facilitate that engagement, where willing investors from the Caribbean, from Africa, from the diaspora, because what we're preaching now actually is what we call global Africa, which tends to bring together those who feel Africa at heart, right? So you don't need to be born in the continent, but you only need to say, I feel African and identify with Africanness to be able to come together. And there are a lot of people who live in the US, who live in the UK, who live within the Caribbean and in Africa, who actually believe so much in this and who want to look for opportunity where they can invest within Africa, within the Caribbean. So we create a forum where they can come together, identify opportunities, step in and take those opportunities forward. We had one of the last event was in Bahamas in June, which we teamed up with our annual meetings. But last year in October, we had the second edition actually here in Guyana, where we had the second edition of the Afro-Caribbean Trade and Investment Forum. And the first edition, of course, was in 2022 in Barbados. So what that does is bringing people together. And what we are seeing also is that it's opening people's eyes to the enormous opportunity that exists, which people didn't know. Because when you are in Africa, you look at the Caribbean, you say, oh, small islands, what can we do there? But you don't know there are opportunities. And when you're also in the Caribbean and you're saying Africa, you think it's just one country, but you don't know the huge market that presents to your manufacturing capabilities. So we're trying to now create that harmony, that coordination point so that people can see what they can do together. Once they identify opportunities, then we will be on the background to provide financing support to make it a reality.
Thank you, sir. Finally, with the growth that we're seeing, the economic transformation that we're seeing in Guyana, how does Afreximbank view the opportunities as well as challenges for financing of projects? Where do you see specific opportunities for growth, specific opportunities for collaboration within the region and with our Afreximbank partners?
Absolutely. So the point is that we understand, of course, Guyana is the fastest growing country around the world by all indicators, which is interesting. And also boils down to the discovery of the huge oil in Guyana, and also to the ease of doing business in Guyana that the president talked about yesterday also, which is something that has buoyed us. So we believe Guyana is actually a huge investment ground where we also can foster those with interest to come in and invest. And for us, what we have seen is, and what has also made us unique, that made the bank grow its balance sheet size from $5 billion in 2015 to about almost close to $40 billion today, is that we changed the approach and we're targeting providing solution to people's problem instead of giving them what we think they need. So that means tailoring our solution. And what we found out also is the fact that Africa and the Caribbean have similarities. So that means sometimes you, in the Caribbean, you are going through something that somebody has gone through in Africa, or in Africa, you're going through what somebody has passed through successfully in the Caribbean. So that means there's room for technical exchange so that you don't end up reinventing the wheel. You are ending up saying, okay, somebody was successful here.
Yes.
How can we adopt it? This company has been supportive in this area. How can we bring them in to play the same role that they had played in making things work elsewhere here? So that becomes the first angle that we want to provide that kind of support and encouragement, because we know, for instance, oil is becoming the mainstay here, and a lot of African countries have benefited a lot from oil, Nigeria, Angola, and the rest. So there are companies who have developed a kind of niche in what they can do within these countries that can also play a role here to help navigate through. There are models that have been successful in Africa. I know the local content law in Guyana, for instance, is being adapted from somewhere. That makes life easier to say we need to make sure that those local operators in Guyana also become an integral part of this huge bumper that is coming here. And we want to encourage that. We believe typical financiers may not be happy to say, let's finance local producers, because they will want to bring in people from outside. But because we have seen it happen elsewhere and it's a successful model, they will realize it's important that even those who now want to take advantage of this boom gets encouraged to do so. And what can make that difference will be financing. And so some of the innovative financing solutions that we've used in Africa, we think will be relevant here. Things like, forfeiting supply chain finance for those who supply or render one kind of service to the oil majors. We can provide kind of bridge financing to them, discounting facilities to them so that they don't need to hold the invoice to maturity. They get paid on time to start the next cycle without having to wait for 90 days before they are paid. So that's just an example. And, in terms of the exploration work, also like production activities, we've also had a lot of successful lessons from financing in Nigeria and Angola. We can also replicate that here. And so for us, we see it as a familiar terrain, and that, for me, gives me confidence that indeed we're here today to bring in knowledge that we've developed and then fit it into what is happening here. And perhaps do some adaptation where necessary. It's something that looks like bread and butter for us, and we'll be able to do it very well.
Sir, thank you so much for your time. And to our listeners, we thank you as well for partaking in this truly edifying episode of the Energy Perspectives podcast. Continue to follow us on our respective social media handles, where we continue to bring you insights from thought leaders here and around the world. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening
Thank
to
you
the
so
Guyana
much.
Energy Perspectives podcast. Listen to us on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you get your podcast.